Welcome, colleagues, this evening. Welcome you to this webinar. One of the webinars that are organized by Progressive Socio-Economic Investment Institute. I want to inform you that we've got only limited numbers to participate in the webinar. Most of our participants are on the overflow through Facebook, and we'll take questions through Facebook. Then we'll have only limited number of people in the webinar. My name is Sediko Rakolote, the founder and the trustee of the Progressive Socio-Economic Investment Institute. The objectives of the Institute is to focus on education, health, and socio-economic development. One of the programs that we are doing on education is to host seminars and discuss various topics. We are having this discussion today in the 16 days of activism against violence on women and children. Our country is facing high level of gender-based violence, and our president, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, has been calling all members of society to stand firm in the fight against gender-based violence. It's a societal problem, and each and every sector has a role to play. Today, our focus is on the role that can be played by media in fighting gender-based violence. Colleagues, we are so fortunate that the presenter for today is within the space of communication. She was born in Bela-Bela in Limpopo. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree specializing in education and teaching. Her experience as a secondary school teacher fueled her passion for education and South African young people. She is committed to improving opportunities for young South Africans from all of lives. She was elected to the provincial legislature in Limpopo in 1999 and re-elected in 2009. She served as an executive mayor of the Waterberg District Municipality, the MEC of Roads and Transport in Limpopo, the MEC of Economic Development, Environment and Tourism in Limpopo. In 2014, she was elected to be a member of the National Assembly. As a member of National Assembly, she served in following committees: a standing committee on finance and an ad hoc committee on the filling of vacancies in the Commission for Gender Equality. In 2015, she was elected to the African National Congress Women's League National Executive Committee and subsequently deployed to be the Secretary General of the Pan-African Women's Organization. During a time as the Secretary General of the PAWO, she was committed in ensuring that all African women, particularly girl children, are empowered. She's currently serving as a Deputy Minister of Communication and Digital Technologies. And as someone from the rural town, she understands and recognizes the vital importance of bridging the digital divide between people living, working, and traveling in regional and remote parts of the country and those in the metropolitan cities. Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker today is none other than the Deputy Minister, Ms. Kekana. Without a waste of time, I will allow her to present. Then we'll take our input within those who are in the webinar and comment, and also go to Facebook to check the questions that are there. Welcome, colleagues, to our session and enjoy the session. Over to you, Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sediko Rakolote. I'm not sure what's happening. I don't see myself on the video, or unless if it's managed from your side.
No, I can't see you also. There's something wrong. Please switch on your video. No, we can see you now.
You can see me where, Sediko?
No, we can see you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now I can see you as well. Okay, thank you very much. And thanks to those who are with us, who have been invited. to be part of this webinar. I greet you this evening in the name of all those who today face gender-based violence and femicide as part of their daily lives. I greet you as we observe 16 days of activism from the 25th of November to the 10th of December. And finally, I greet you in memory of all those whose lives were taken by rapists, murderers, and violent men who believe they are superior to the women and children they have raped, they have murdered, they have maimed, and committed untold atrocities unto. The media plays a vital role in raising awareness on gender-based violence and femicide. It sets the agenda, which gives it the power to dictate what people see, hear, as well as shape their attitudes towards different aspects of life. However, even in this era of an influx of multimedia tools to communicate, there is still a lack of awareness and dialogue on what comprises GBV, what legislation frameworks are in place for legal recourse, prevention mechanisms, where to go for help, care, and rehabilitation. In 2015, Gender Links monitored more than 27,000 news items from television and radio and newspapers in 14 Southern African Development Community, that is SADC countries, to assess the representation and portrayal of women in the media in SADC. One of the key findings from the Gender and Media Progress Study, GMPS, is that GBV and stories that mentioned GBV accounts for a mere 1% of the topics covered, despite the high levels of GBV in SADC. This is a 3% drop from 4% recorded in 2010. The research also found that GBV is covered in insensitive ways, with questionable headlines that trivialize the experiences of women, contribute to stereotypes and victim blaming. Women often suffer secondary victimization from the media through the news reportage that emanates from some journalists. The SADC Protocol on Gender and Development encourages media to desist from promoting violence against all persons, especially women and children, depicting women as helpless victims of abuse and reinforcing gender oppression. It also encourages the media to play a constructive role in the eradication of GBV through gender-sensitive coverage. A study conducted by the Film and Publications Board, which is our entity as the Department of Communications, and UNISA in 2014 to assess the impact of media content on South African children showed that our children are becoming desensitized to violence. All of the children interviewed said that they have watched a film or played a game that had violence in it. This was across all age groups, from the 10-year-olds to the 15-year-olds, and 42% said that they had experienced violence at some level. Most of the children said that they felt like fighting after they had played a violent game, and they would fight if someone in their life was irritating them. Many South African children are exposed to violence at an early age in our homes, in our schools and communities, environments where children should feel safe and protected. Even children who grow up in relative safety are exposed when they are allowed to access violent content indiscriminately in the form of films, games, or other content. Violence begets more violence, plunging society into an ongoing and self-perpetuating downward spiral of generational trauma, and exposure to violence has become normalized. The advent of new media and technologies coincides with a growing trend of children being exposed to harmful content and falling victim to predators online. Child sexual abuse material, cyberbullying, online trafficking, and revenge pornography are amongst many acts of violence that are perpetrated online. According to an Ipsos survey conducted in 28 countries in 2018, 65% of all incidents of cyberbullying occurred on social media, with 45% perpetrated from mobile phones, 38% emanating from online messaging, 34% from online chat rooms, 19% from emails, 14% from other websites, and 6% from other technologies. Now, these gadgets provide us access to information, but the risks are in the security of these devices. We take security precautions in our homes and cars with alarm systems, gated estates, and the like, but don't bother to put security measures on our devices, or especially those of our children, letting in a whole world of criminal elements into the very homes that are protected physically. Pedophiles continue to stay ahead of the technology curve, anticipating changes in children's online behavior. And InHope statistics, InHope, it's one of our entities abroad where FPB has also enrolled into. Now, this InHope statistics show that they largely target 94.5% of young girls from the ages of 3 to 13. The age group has dropped over the past 5 years from 16 years, as these younger victims are not as tech savvy and or aware of the lurking dangers. Last year, out of 619 feature films, Film and Publication Board classified, only 37 were classified A, which means all can watch, and only 58 received a PG rating, PG meaning parental guidance. The rest contained violence, sex, sexual violence, strong language, and or drugs. And this same trend has been happening in video games. From a global perspective, in 2017, UN Women developed a handbook and training of trainers for effective media coverage of gender-based violence. The handbook is intended for journalists, editors, students of journalism, bloggers, and public relations officials in institutions working to end violence against women. The handbook also provides a training methodology for responsible coverage of violence against women in order to facilitate the transfer of knowledge and skills to all who would like to take a more active role in addressing the issue. Some key principles to remember when engaging in the online space. Internet is equals to forever. You may be able to delete posts, but once its impression has been made on the www. It is there forever. An old picture of your young days will surface when you are applying for a job or even being a candidate for public office. Piracy is not only about the legality of intellectual property. It is also about sexual grooming on pirated DVDs, CDs, as pornography is found on kids' cartoon videos today. Coverage of GBVF news stories in the media by newsrooms, content producers, regulators, and governments need to be more mindful of how content of women and children are portrayed, and not only for news optics and show ratings. Seeing a victim of GBV being torn apart in court or humiliated in the media does not bode well for other victims to come forward or believe that they have the rights or be treated with sensitivity and dignity while we continue the fight of violence against women and children. The media's core role should then be about creating an enabling environment for those to speak out, education on GBV issues, and leading dialogues on solutions and ideas for prevention and care like we're doing today. So we take this opportunity, our facilitator, that as women, the support that men are giving us are joining hands in making sure that this does not happen in their name. It's something that will go far. But we also need to teach our children at an early age, especially the boy child, to love the sister, to protect their sisters, and to make sure that they live together in a better environment going forward, because all this is about their future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deputy Minister. Very informative. It's all our responsibility, and media has got a role to play in the fight against gender-based violence and femicide. Colleagues, that was a submission from our Honorable Deputy Minister in Kekana. It's time now for comments, inputs from those who are participating, and we'll also take questions from the Facebook. I see a hand from Joe Omane. Your hand is up, you can come in, my brother. Unfortunately, we can't see your face, we can only see the forehead. No, tell your...
The deputy minister is obstructing. Thank you very much, Sediko. Thank you very much to the deputy minister. I think this particular presentation that you have just made, it theoretically and empirically ground the notion of violence against women. And then others call it gender-based violence. And I would like us to be more nuanced in terms of how we analyze it, because it is very specific form. It's a subcategory or a specific form of gender-based violence, because we are talking about the situation whereby women are targeted by virtue of them being women. So that is why I call it violence against women. But broadly speaking, we can refer to it as gender-based violence. And we know very well that when we are talking about violence, gender-based violence, we need to be contextual and historical. In the context of South Africa, the situation is very bad for our women. And then the minister has also spoken about the impact of media content. This is something which is very much important. Because if you look at the root, the deep-seated root of all these things, if you're talking about violence against women, this is one of the faces of sexist oppression. And at the core of sexist oppression is patriarchy. And then we need to talk about that one, because that is where the problem is. Because patriarchy manifests itself in various ways, and violence against women or gender-based violence is an example, or is one among others. This is the system which privileges men and disadvantages women. And then the deputy minister has also talked about the fact that young children are being impacted. They learn, there is this thing called internalization. That is appropriation of a popular culture. That is where media comes into the picture. Because media is accessible to everybody. But there are certain influencers, we call them influencers in the society. These are the people who are able to behave or act in such a manner that other people are able to emulate them. That is why we are talking about an appropriated culture. We call it a popular culture. And then if you look at the popular culture, you look at various facets of the media in terms of produce, the program, the messaging that is being carried out by certain programs, all of them, almost all of them, if you check them, they are disadvantaging women. If you look at the songs of the most popular artists, their music videos, who are the people who are naked? They are women. And then men, you can see that they are enjoying the upper hand in those particular contexts. So we need to make sure that we start with our influencers. And then if you look at the role of ICASA as well, as the regulatory body, it is responsible for ensuring compliance with the statutory rules. But it talks about explicit sex, offensive language, and those things are explicit. What about things that are subtle? Precisely because if you look at prejudices, if you look at attitudes, negative attitudes against women, they are not always overt. They are covered, they are subtle, due to the fact that there is a legislation that is in place in order to ensure that we are discouraging that. There is a constitution which prescribes the practicing of all those forms of oppression. I call them forms of oppression, and I call violence against women as one of the faces of oppression that contribute towards their exploitation in the economic space, socially, politically, and otherwise. So this is where the problem lies. The problems lie with the media. I don't think we are policing it very well from ICASA's perspective. If you look at the adverts, so many adverts, we can go on and on. I don't want to mention them, Minister. But what I'm saying all these organizations within and without the state that are responsible for monitoring compliance, that are responsible for making sure that they contribute towards a society which is free from discrimination and other forms of oppression. They need to take into that account. They need to understand how oppression is intersecting or is linked to violence against women, because violence against women is a telltale sign of oppression.
Okay, Komane, let's stop right there so that we can take other hands. You'll come back. You'll come back. Can we take Advocate Witumelo Lintwetlaku?
Good evening, Mr. Rakolote. Good evening, the Minister, Deputy Minister. Good evening, all the members of the panel. It is a very interesting, presentation that the Deputy Minister has just presented now, and I'm very intrigued by the fact that she actually touched the areas which are seemingly to be problematic currently within our country. The access to techno-savvy materials that has in hindsight, managed to put our kids, or maybe almost the gender-based victims, into the much risk that we would have thought it would be, in a way, protective against them. As a parent, as a legal practitioner, and as a member of the BCCSA, and looking into what is happening into the media environment, I would like to say we need to play a rather protective role, not only from a regulatory perspective, but what about the parents or maybe the households which are child-headed, where there is no specific monitoring of this kind of processes? How do we protect them? Where do we put a line of defense for those kind of families, the people who are illiterate? Because our society still needs to be educated of what constituted gender-based violence. Those vulnerable societies, how do we go back and re-educate them? Because each and every year we speak about gender-based violence, but we still see it escalating. There hasn't been any reduction in numbers. There hasn't been any reduction in the killings of women around the country. It does not look like there's an understanding of what constitutes GBV and how people are expected to behave, just so we cap this very giant that we keep dealing with within the 16 days of violence. I know each time when we discuss these matters, like last year as we did, we always promise like to follow through so that we raise the much needed awareness throughout the year. But unfortunately, because of whatever commitments that we all seem to be having, this seems to be the only time that we get to reiterate the importance of raising this kind of awareness. But yet at the same time, we still see living out the volatile environment, and people are still hurt. The society is still getting hurt. Women are still getting killed, kids are still being violated physically. What do we do as a government to make sure that this is a long-term approach to things and it is practical? We don't only get to sit in forums like this to discuss them, but we see it working out, and not only within the 16 days of activism. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Advocate Buitumelo Linchwe Tlaku. I'm paid. I don't know if it's Linchwe or Linchwe, but I'm sure you will pardon me. Advocate Mohale.
Thank you very much, Sediko Rakolote, for the tenor. Thank you for a good, beautiful presentation, Deputy Minister. I just want to find out what influence we can give, especially from the side of government, with regards to the kind of work that gets commissioned and flighted, especially on the public broadcaster. Because I feel government needs to influence society through those kinds of platforms. When you look now at SABC, it has become the most violent place, a platform where people see some of the most violent and trashy and whatever programs. And I feel we are missing an opportunity where we could be influencing some of the work that we're commissioning. Even the BCCSA advert, I'm glad that Advocate is here. It has just become one of those adverts to say, if you see something, report.
We have lost you, Advocate Mohale. We have lost you, Advocate Mohale. Okay, while we are still waiting for her to reconnect, we can take Commissioner Bela Mutupi.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I agree with what Ntate Komani has raised, that our music portrays women as sex objects. And unfortunately, people say, no, it's because these people, people believe that sex sells. But even if it was to be like that, it's only women who are portrayed half naked, and we see them on our TVs. most music videos portray women as such, and they are being flighted on our TVs, and we see them, whether we control it or not, whether we we make sure that our children do not watch it, but it's there. It's being availed for us as people who consume the services of a different channels on our TVs. Secondly, if we agree that gender-based violence is as a result of inequalities which are informed by the kind of society that we come from, a patriarchal society, then you would agree with me that the media as well is contributing, because we are, whether we want to accept it or not, we are generally a very violent society in South Africa. We look at the news, we see the reports about violations happening every time in our country. And we have soapies, we have stories being flighted on our TVs, which portrays violence to be very stylish, violent, but which portrays crime to be the thing to achieve whatever one wants to achieve. Of late, a lot of what we watch on our TVs has to deal with crime. Soapies have to deal with crime, has to deal with drugs, has to deal with violence, carrying of guns, using of guns. And of course, we are cautioned to make sure that our kids do not watch this. And there are those families where there are no parents, and these people access television, because of course our government has made sure that people can watch, can access a lot of channels free of charge at the government's expenses. It means even in those families, those kids do access this information that we see on a daily basis. We have this soapies that shows a lot of violence. We have this music that shows that portrays women as sex objects. We see it on a daily basis. We have adverts which are still using women in the as in their traditional societal allocated roles of that of a woman being the woman's place being in a kitchen. You see washing detergents being advertised. It's only one or two that I've seen where you have men, but the majority of them, it's women who are portrayed to be responsible to look after the laundry in their homes. When you look at adverts where they talk about food, they talk about cooking, they talk about looking after kids, it's always women in the main. If you are to change the mindset of the society from being a patriarchal society, if we are to ensure that we change the narrative that a woman's place is in the kitchen, we need to use the media to educate our people, to ensure that the mindset is changed, because people would always want to mimic what they see on TV. They want to live the life that they see there. And if they see violence, our kids grow up with this thing in their minds. They see crime. Everybody sees women as looking after kids, cooking, doing the laundry. That's what they would believe, and it will never change. No one will believe that a woman's place is in the kitchen. So I believe that the media has to be used, chairperson. And we see a lot of blood. If that can be reduced, chair, not on the news, in particular on the dramas that we see on TV, there is a lot of blood in a society that is as violent as ours. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Bela. I'll give Deputy Minister a chance to make comments, then we can go back to Ntatekomane because I've requested him to stop. Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, facilitator. You know, the words of our participants are, or what they have just shared, is also very important. I will give you one or two examples, and I like one of the speakers who also spoke about child-headed families and kids who are raised by grandmothers and so on. I think we need to really embark on a big campaign to schools as the department because of the work we are doing, especially with FPB. I told them today, because the current board's term is coming to an end. So we're saying goodbye today. But I can tell you, the kind of work that FPB does in classifying movies, in making sure that there's a takedown notice that FPB also do. If you remember that guy who was in Greece who said the K word outside the country, and then he was followed until he came back and appeared in court. That's the work of the FPB. And if you are outside the jurisdiction of South Africa, through InHope, it's an entity that is like FPB, but it has Interpol mandate where it can connect with and follow up, whether on your email, on whatever you shall have said or posted, or whatever revenge pornography you shall have done. They are able to follow you up and so on. So one of the things I was saying, and which is a campaign we must carry out, one, is that we must go to schools and teach our children and campaign with teachers and parent bodies to say, there are schools where they give kids tablets, but they disable certain apps so that kids cannot go into that. So it's specifically for school material and all these things. Many schools are starting to do that. That's one. Two, we must also campaign to make our kids to use the South African domain name .co.za or whatever, because once you use that email address, it's easy for us to follow up if somebody is bullying you. But once it's a Gmail or a Hotmail or whatever, we are unable to follow up. But if it's a South African domain name, we can track that person and be able to do that. But the other important thing is that, and I was saying this to the kids in Cape Town last week, that you see, you guys have a tendency of seeing kids fighting amongst themselves, or a learner fighting or the teacher, or vice versa. And then you video those things, and at the end, it goes viral. And these kids end up either taking their lives and so on. Even teachers now, many teachers want to resign because of some of this media, aggressive media, social media activities, because they just feel, you know, things are going hayway. And I'm saying we really have to have a dialogue on some of these things and disallow some of the tendencies that are coming up. And in that conversation, I was with this guy of Molo Chongololo, Patrick Solomons. He has grown old now. So Patrick then says, you know, Pinky, there are households which cannot afford 2 televisions. Now, the kids were watching the Popeye, parents are back from work. They now want to watch The River, they want to watch Wajola 99, they want to watch all these things. And because the kids don't have any other option, all of them sit around and watch. And parents, without knowing that some of these things are classified accordingly, or they don't maybe understand, because some parents who will not understand the classification and all these things. So it then puts these kids to consume this content that is also going hayway. But he also says there are parents who put televisions in the bedrooms of their kids without monitoring. And you don't know what these kids are watching, and so on and so on. And part of the exercise that we took up after going to schools, having that dialogue with the Department of Education in Western Cape, I went to destroy the pirated DVDs. Now on that DVD, the one that people buy at the robots, at the traffic lights, that DVD, you see a bunny or a Spider-Man outside, only to find that inside it's 4 or 5 porno movies and so on and so on. And people buy those things, kids buy those things at 10 rand. And young people get exposed to sex and sexual material at an early age. Now, the biggest problem is that in the African culture, mommy can't talk sex with the child and so on, it's taboo. But we now have to change because there's a generation gap, and our kids, if we don't tell them, they will learn it somewhere else and it becomes uncontrollable going forward. So I'm just saying, we really have to now embark on this thing. 2 things that we are going to do. It's around awareness on cyber, online security. It's also about the domain name to make sure that our people, but people should also know, once you forward something that is violence about Pinky Kekana, you forward it to somebody else, you are also guilty as charged. It is criminalized, including revenge pornography. I mean, if I'm no longer your girlfriend Sediko, and because we have been in our own private space doing whatever we're doing, and video recording and so on. Once you go out and say, because I was a partner, therefore I'm going to expose and make it go viral, you are criminally charged about those things. So we need to start to educate our people around some of those things. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. Any other comments, input from colleagues? Now I can bring you back, Ntate Komane, because I can see you are burning. Let me bring you back, Ntate Komane.
This is a matter which is close to my heart, because I am also a scholar of oppression. That is why I will always talk about oppression as inextricably linked to gender-based violence. And then I suppose, Deputy Minister, you can add on the educational drive, people should learn about sexist oppression and its effects. Not only sexist oppression, because oppression manifests itself in different ways. You get oppressed as a result of class, you get oppressed as a result of race, which is racism, very important, and as well as on the basis of sexual orientation or nationality. All these variables are intersecting, and then they generate a particular experience on the targeted people or individuals or group of people. So like I've been saying that if I look at the role of ICASA, I know it is regulation is to ensure compliance. I think the mandate has to be improved to say that you look also on any issue that denotes oppression. It may be based on race, it may be based on class, and all these variables that I have cited. Because it is very much important to develop a multi-pronged approach to these issues, because you can say you are dealing with gender-based violence, only to find that there will be violence which is motivated by racism, and with the other one which is motivated by sexual orientation. So you need a holistic approach, because oppression manifests itself differently. It's like a monster with so many heads, if you prefer. So I would like the role of ICASA to be reconceptualized or reconfigured in order to include all those particular issues. Not only look at explicit sex, offensive language. Those things they know very well that these things are prohibited. They are not going to do it. So the unintended consequences of saying that they look at explicit sex and then offensive language is that all these things, they will go underground. They won't disappear. They will go underground. That is to mean that they will be covered. They will be more subtle. So they need to make sure that they are not only focusing on matters at the surface level, but they are also going beyond the depths in order to make sure that you uproot the core of the problem. The core of the problem, as far as gender-based violence is concerned, particularly violence against women, is patriarchy, a system which is internalized by young people, a system which is reproduced by different systems at the meso, micro, and macro levels, at all levels, by different people, even by women. You will be surprised, Deputy Minister, that there are certain instances whereby women themselves are promoting patriarchy, because the system is structured in such a way that when you behave or when you are deviant in inverted commas, then it rewards you. But you cannot go beyond that because you are engaging the system within its own logic. But when you disrupt its existence, that is where you get punished. That is why women are always exposed to what is called double bind. That's why we're damned or be damned, in double sense, right? For example, if a girl doesn't want to be involved with men, they will say, hey, this one is uptight. Then if she becomes involved with this man and they broke up, she goes to another one, they said, this one is too loose. That is the double bind that I'm talking about. And that is what women are facing in our society. And we need to get to the top of it. Thanks, Sediko.
Thank you so much. I know you are very passionate about this thing. You are a scholar of operation. Advocate Witumelo.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I'm very much happy about Mr. Joseph's, input on this matter, specifically who are the primary caregivers, unintended, contribution towards the GBV. It still goes back to what the Deputy Minister says. We still need to educate. And who do we educate? At the board there are 7, the Nelson Mandela, we have actually made a decision that when the students start on their first year, we need to start a program as an orientation program around the behavioral expectation as when they enter the campus. We're going to also include their lecturers. We're also going to include even, the staff that cleans at the rests, because we all have to create an element of mutual respect. Because I know that we cannot carry everything, but where you can carry, try and do the difference and make the difference the best way that we can. Where you can carry, try to say at the point of entrance, this is how we're trying to curb this big elephant that we have in the room. And bit by bit, we start to have the society that understand what GBV is. Because I do not even begin to understand that, depending on the societal background, many societies don't discuss this. Many households don't discuss this for what it is. I think gender-based violence, it only ends with rape and sexual implicated offenses, but it doesn't go beyond how are we expected to respect each other as men and women as we interact socially. What is respect and what is not respect? What is societal definition of respect? What is the communal definition of respect? We don't get to discuss that for what they are. So where we are within the media space, maybe then we should have approaches of saying, each and every time before the program starts, can't you just make an advert about GBV where we raise an awareness? This is the behavior that we're looking to kind of create within the society. This is how we want to heal South Africa going forward. And maybe with time, we're going to socialize our country differently, because really we talk about this on a yearly basis. And still, I believe even as we are speaking currently, there might be people who are currently being violated. So where are we going to find ways of curbing this big elephant? So each and every time, at least the adverts should be such that it teaches people how to behave, how to socialize, how to conscientize the society as a whole towards this big elephant that we seem to be having and is not seeming to be going away. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Advocate Witumelo Takung. Other inputs from other colleagues before we give the Deputy Minister the last chance to respond and make closing remarks. Other inputs from other colleagues? From Facebook, the question is, there was a time where the COO of SABC banned the SABC from showing violence on television. Will you advocate for such as a deputy minister, that the SABC should not show violence on their screen? And I know that you'll be infringing on the editorial policies independence here. But that's a question. They say, will you support that narrative that media should not show violence on their screens? Over to you, Deputy Minister. We are about to close now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rakolote. I think I'm impressed by the level of engagement that we have, and it is also, giving me more courage when we have men like Ndate Joseph, who's so committed towards uprooting. We need to have many Josephs and many Rakolotas. I know you are a gender activist, Sediko. And I think we need to multiply many of you to bring this awareness and to make sure that you hold hands with all of us. And it should not be a women's issue. Like others have said, it should not only happen in the 16 days, it must be something that happens 365 days. I agree fully with re-looking at the regulations in ICASA, given the level of gender-based violence and how South Africa is rated, whether in the continent or even globally. And we should put, in fact, it's one of the takeaways that I'm going to do from these engagements, and thanks to that contribution, because ICASA falls squarely under us, and it's something that one can start to engage with the executives of ICASA on how we should come back and do and include some of these things. And there's a program on the white paper on audio and audiovisual white paper on how the public broadcaster, ICASA's role, and others can be reviewed. And we must use this opportunity to also deal with the issues of content, the films and the Netflixes of this world and everybody, so that we also regulate that space and strengthen our hand in that area to make sure that the content should be predominantly South African, pushing our culture, but also mindful of some of the violent, including the subtle innuendos that also come with some of these things. So I agree fully with what our speakers were talking about. So even on the issue of the advert by the SABC, fortunately I'm responsible for the SABC, and I really have to support them even during these trying times of what confronts them, especially around resources that are not there for them. So I will engage with the board on pushing on that element of educating our communities and making sure that issues of gender-based violence are given priority, including an advert that can really make sure that our people do not promote GBV in whatever form it manifests itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deputy Minister. I can see our colleagues are still burning. I'll give you last round. Commissioner Mutupi, I can see your hand is up.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, firstly, let me agree with what the advocate, I see the Deputy Minister is laughing, what the advocate has said. Hi, Deputy Minister. Chair, I think awareness around GBV should be an issue for 365 days. Because all these years, we concentrate more on it and raise awareness only for 16 days. And 16 days is too little for an issue as big as gender-based violence, which does not seem to be reduced. We often get reports that it's going up instead of going down. So I want to agree with what the advocate has said, that there should be adverts in between programs, adverts which raises awareness around gender-based violence. Because when you interact with communities, you learn that there are men and women out there there are things that they do not even see as part of gender-based violence. There are things that they do not even understand. When you explain, it's then that they see them. For example, when we interacted with traditional leaders in the Free State Province and we raised issues around sexual harassment, they were shocked at the fact that even catcalling is part of what we call sexual harassment because of the way they were socialized and how they grew up, because they grew up with certain concepts. When one made an example that when he was growing up, he knew that if you wanted a woman, you'd go and twist their arm until they say, yes, I love you. And he still does not think it's gender-based violence because he believes that he does not mean any harm, because he thinks that that's his way of being romantic. And there is a whole lot of examples that they made about like if catcalling, for example, they believe it's not part of sexual harassment because they think that you are just observing the beauty that is presented to you, and they do not see anything wrong in men catcalling women. So there is hence I say I agree with what the advocate has said, that there is a need of raising awareness so that both men and women would know what constitutes GBV. What are those things that you do to each other that would be classified as gender-based violence, that would be seen as harassing other people? Because unfortunately, the manner in which we were socialized, some of these things, of course, some are violence, and we know violence is bad, but there are those that they do not understand until they are told and until they are made aware that this is wrong. And in particular, young men and women. I believe if we have such in-between programs, we have a message for 365 days and not wait until the 16 days of activism, because unfortunately women die every month or week or day, and a person is being abused every day. So there is a need that we raise awareness on a daily basis. We do not grow tired of raising awareness. I thank you, Sediko Rakolote.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Mutupi. Before I close, Ndatokomane.
Thank you very much, Bela-Bela Rakolote. That awareness, Deputy Minister, and then should be expanded. I also think that it has to be, because awareness can be carried out at informal levels. That is public education. I also would like to request you to start thinking about how to influence the educational space in the formal sector, in the sense that if you look at violence is psychological and physical. And then in other ways, we need to make sure that we come up with the curriculum which talks to those particular issues. Otherwise, we are running the risk of producing the technically gifted but socially incompetent citizenry. That is not what we want. So what we want to influence the psyche of all the individuals. When we say we want to influence them, we want to influence how they think about women and how they feel about women and how they relate with women. Hence, we are talking about influencing their cognitive, affective, and behavioral dimension. If that is the core, those three aspects are very much important. And those who are in psychology would agree with me that if we want to influence people, those are the key levels that you need to take account of. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Komane. Thank you so much, colleagues. This discussion was meant for an hour, and we really appreciate your participation. And thank you, Deputy Minister, for accepting the invite in a very short notice. We really appreciate, and I just twisted your arm to say, please come and present. Thank you so much, Deputy Minister. Colleagues, we really appreciate for your participation also. And before we go,